Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? I know it's getting really stressy out there and lots of emotions running high, but I'm still trying to piece all this stuff together. And I've come up with this unbelievable connection with George Floyd, Lincoln, Trump, and the fall of Rome. Okay, so this is going to be all mostly about the connection, and I do have some connections with the sky as well to Lincoln's death and everything. So it's a pretty good video. It won't be too long, but it's kind of exciting because it brings us all into this timeline that we're in. What I do want to say is that I don't wish harm to anybody, that I hope everybody is healthy and happy through this presidential kind of battle that's going on. And I've just put stuff together here to show that there's a connection to a lot of our events that's happened over the year. And this is just connecting the dots. I'm not going to say in any way what I predict is going to happen because I don't want to be liable. So I'm just going to show you all the connections and you can come up with your own interpretation to these connections. So The Hill did this article comparing Trump to Lincoln. It says the summer's Republican National Convention was full of references to Abraham Lincoln, which is no surprise given that Donald Trump likes to compare himself to the 16th president. Okay, so here, for starters, they share the same political party. Lincoln was the first Republican president, and Trump is the 19th. And the 19th is like the moon cycles, right? Because the moon repeats itself every 19 years. Both men were long shot candidates. In 1860, Lincoln, like Trump, defeated a field of better connected rivals to capture the Republican nomination and win the general election. Both men came to the office with little or no government experience. Lincoln had served only 4 terms, and then he was assassinated. And we're going to get into all that and how it all links to George Floyd. Lincoln, like Trump, was furiously attacked in the media, and the newspapers called him a demon, a buffoon, a miserable failure, a grace to the nation. The man who votes for Lincoln now is a traitor, was in one of the Wisconsin papers. And you can imagine what Southern newspapers wrote. Okay, so during the Civil War, federal authorities sometimes harassed or closed anti-war newspapers and even arrested editors. Lincoln did not order the suppression, but he rarely objected it. Lincoln, like Trump, developed ingenious end runs around the press to communicate directly with the people. He managed to get letters and speeches widely published so voters would know his thoughts and words. Trump who has done the same with rallies, 90-minute press conferences, and his tweets. The Washington political establishment viewed Lincoln, like Trump, with wariness and outright hostility. He was considered a rube from the prairies, clearly out of his depth. Mary Lincoln, like Melania Trump, was snubbed by many of the nation's capitals. And they go on to say that Trump is a street fighter, and so was Lincoln. He was a scrapper. So even Joe Biden takes a jab at Trump for comparing himself to Lincoln. So even after the election, if the election riots break out, Trump should follow Lincoln's advice. They're always referring to him as Lincoln. Here's another tweet referring to him as Lincoln that one of my subscribers sent me. Interesting, the Democrats tried subversion in 1860 and election rigging in 1864. The parallels between Trump and Lincoln seem to run very deep. So the mail-in ballots were part of the plot to deny Lincoln's reelection in 1864. So you see there's lots of mirroring going on. It's like history is repeating itself. So then Trump suggests Lincoln's legacy is questionable, brags about his own work for Black Americans. And this was all to do with his interview in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So he says, I think I've done more for the Black community than any other president, and let's take a pass on Abraham Lincoln because he helped free them, right? So Trump's interview came nearly 3 weeks after the death of Black man George Floyd. After a white Minneapolis cop kneeled on his neck for more than 8 minutes, ignited protests nationwide. So yeah, so members of the DC National Guard stand on the steps of Lincoln monitoring demonstrations during the peaceful protest against police brutality and the death of George Floyd. So they're always going back to Lincoln, right? I am greeted with hostile press. I like at the likes of which no president has ever seen, and the closest would be the gentleman right up there, he's referring to Lincoln. They always said Lincoln, nobody got treated worse than Lincoln. Trump continues, I believe I am treated worse. I think I've done more for the black community than any other president, and let's take a pass on Abraham Lincoln because he was good, but although it's always questionable, in other words, the end result. So that was a weird statement, I find, the end result. This article is just criticizing Trump, but they mention San Gimignano. It's a town in Italy, and they're referring to the towers of Manhattan, almost like probably like the Trump Towers, and referring them to these towers in Italy. So this is a town where they started like competing on how tall the towers could be. So it's like, like one person put a tower up, then somebody else put another one. They had to like eventually like stop it so that they couldn't keep doing that. So there's a feast day as well there on March 12th. So I just thought that was a funny reference. It's like they're saying that he's, there's no end to him. He's just going to keep trying to be bigger and better, and they're just criticizing him. But what's interesting is it's in Italy, and this brings us back to Rome, because I'm going to show you how this all ties into Rome and the fall of Rome and Julius Caesar. It all links together, George Floyd, Lincoln, and Julius Caesar. So they talk about chaos and gobbledygook is what Trump America is. And what now, at least than 5 weeks from the election, we have our October surprise. Trump's syndromes are relatively mild. The White House says, but of course, they could be worsened. So they're saying his COVID sickness was the October surprise. Trump may have to be quarantined and all that. So no more mocking of Biden for wearing a big mask. The Trump's braggadocio, it's like he's bragging all the time, part of his appeal to millions of Americans is in tatters. Perhaps he will recover quickly with a redoubled conviction that the virus is an exaggerated threat, or declaring that his enduring through the illness means that God wants him to be president. But what I feel is the curtain coming down and closing a chapter in American derangement. The virus is Trump's deus ex machina, not his retribution, but his salvation, because the road he has trodden can only lead to disaster. So it's just like they're putting him down all the time. But these words, this deus ex machina, I wanted to check that out. So a deus ex machina is the God from the machine. It's a plot device. It's like you're expecting the plot to go one way, and then all of a sudden it changes. And they were using it in Shakespeare. He used it a lot. So the world is a stage, Shakespeare, right? So Aristotle was the first to use the Greek term equivalent to the phrase deus ex machina to describe the technique as a device to resolve a plot. Yeah. So it was done with Aristotle. Shakespeare also used it in many plays, and this is all tying up to what I'm going to tell you that has to do with Lincoln's death. Okay, so I'm kind of like setting you up here. So Trump got in a Twitter war with the co-founder of Lincoln Project, Steve Smith, and it was really nasty. They started, he went really after Trump. We are so much better at this than you. Your team of crooks, wife beaters, degenerates, weirdos, and losers. You are loser number one, kind of thing. And it's just evil. But it's all a game, I think. It's just like a charade to get everybody's emotions like totally like revved and just stuck on the pillars. So Jared and Ivanka threatened to sue them for this ad that they put up in Times Square. So you can see there's lots of connections where they're referring comparing Trump to Lincoln in many, many different cases. So a few years before Lincoln's death, there was this big thing that went on in the United States with John Brown. He was actually trying to free slaves down in the South, and he ended up being hung because of it. Okay, so this created a huge divide within the United States. It was all over his death. So after his death, he had this painting done of him with this black woman with her baby, you know, because he was trying to free the slaves. But the saying on top of his head here is "Sic semper tyrannis." Okay, and this saying was also used in Lincoln's death and Julius Caesar's supposedly death. Some historians don't believe it, but they link it to Caesar as well. Okay, so this phrase was recommended by George Mason, so one of the Freemasons, to the Virginia Convention in 1776 as part of the Commonwealth seal. The seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia shows virtue, a spear in the hand with her foot on the recumbent form of tyranny, whose crown lies nearby. The seal was planned by Mason and designed by George White, who signed the United States Declaration of Independence and taught law to Thomas Jefferson. A joke referencing the image on the seal that dates as far back as the Civil War is that "Sic semper tyrannis" actually means "get your foot off my neck." Okay, so this is where it ties in. It's always about your neck and being able to breathe. And I realize it's partly because of we're going into the age of Aquarius, which is all to do with air. Okay, so we're going out of Pisces, which is water, and we're going into air. So this is why everything's referring to breath and air. And it's also tying into Julius Caesar and Lincoln with this motto. And it even gets more crazy, where this motto was used as well. Hang on. So this rebellion to the tyrants is obedience to God. So, and there's also ships named after it using the same phrase, USS. So the phrase was connected to the big part of the Civil War. Okay, so this phrase is also connected with Caesar and the fall of Rome, which went into 3 years of civil war. So this phrase has Civil War all over it. It was a huge event. You know, they couldn't allow journalists to come in because if they were anti-slave, then they were going to get, run out of town. There was people all at his execution. He was hung. Church bells were ringing all across the United States. It was a massive, huge event, this hanging of this poor man that was trying to free slaves. So if you don't know the history, go and check it out, because there's pages and pages and pages of how influential this man's life was to American history. And he was 63 years old, and they rang a bell for him 63 times. And that's equivalent to what I'm going to tell you at the end of this video. Now, what's really weird is there was a poet, and Lincoln's shooter was there watching him get executed. So among spectators were Walt Whitman and actor John Wilkes Booth, the latter of whom was such a white supremacist that in 5 years he would assassinate President Lincoln after Lincoln supported giving blacks the vote. Okay, so it's really weird that he's linked into this man and this phrase, because John Brown has this phrase of this flag over his head in these paintings, and then Booth ends up using the same phrase when he kills Lincoln. So here, Whitman's star is the fallen star of America itself. The characteristics of Whitman's association with the political poetic myth of to counter Booth's cry on the night of the assassination, Sic semper tyrannis, and the increasingly popular image of Lincoln as a dictator leader bent on abrogating rather than preserving basic American liberties. The star, seemingly immortal, so now we have this star and it's immortal, is associated with Lincoln's vision of America. Okay, the vision of reconciliation. So yeah, and he has his lilacs. Venus is the star, the hermit thrush bird. Okay, so we have the bird, and this is also known as the nightingale. It's the bird that sings at night. There's also other mythos about the nightingale. There's songs written about it, and I think it's because you want to be the songbird that sings at night, because I do believe this event happens at midnight, And this is all reference to that. When does a bird sing? When you're free, right? And it's a nightingale, so it has to do with night. And then Venus, of course, is, the pentagram that's on the American flag. It all has to do with this spiritual event as well, because she's like the light bringer. She's phosphorus. She's the morning star. She's Jesus. So you see how it all ties in to Lincoln's death and this poet that happens to be watching John Brown's death, and also Booth is there. It's just weird. And the lilacs is because the leaves are heart-shaped, and I do think they represent kind of like the hanging fruit, okay? Because actually Miley Cyrus does a song called Lilac Wine. So yeah, I think it is the hanging fruit. So with Lincoln's death, well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, you old gal, you sock-a-doggalizing old man trap. This was what Lincoln was laughing at when he got shot. And Booth opened the doors, stepped forward, and shot Lincoln from behind with his Derringer. And the bullet entered Lincoln's skull behind his left ear. And I think it was a 44 gun, Derringer. And 44 in gematria is death. Okay, so Rathburg turned to see Booth standing in gunsmoke, less than 4 feet behind Lincoln, and Booth shouted "Sis Semper Tyrannis" as he jumped across the stage, and people thought he was acting. But they go through. You can go on Wikipedia. They'll tell you the total detail of this, what happened. It's almost like you're reading a script from a movie. It's like so detailed how they tell you what he said and what he did, and it's just crazy. Oh, here they're saying he shouted freedom, but there's other articles. Yeah, down here it's he says "Sic Semper Tyrannis," but some people thought he heard freedom, but people got the story wrong, or who knows. At this point, I don't know what's real and what's not anymore. But anyhow, it just seems so weird that it's so detailed out. Like, how did they have that all, planned? They knew exactly all the words that he was saying and what he was listening to. Like, it's totally recorded, like to the point where it seems like it's almost like a script. Now, Booth was an actor, so was his dad, and so he knew all the Shakespeare's lines, and Julius Caesar was a Shakespeare play, so he knew the line from that. But what's also weird is the Oklahoma bomber had Lincoln's shirt on with the same phrase. So that I just find bizarre. So what else is weird is this thing called the curse of the Tippecanoe. It's also called the Temesky curse. It's an Indian that cursed all presidents that ended up being elected on a 0-year and 20-year intervals. Okay, Harrison was the first one to go, and you can see the whole list here: Abraham Lincoln. Then we had Garfield, William McKinley, Warren G. Harding, Roosevelt, and JFK. And, some of them were shot and some of them died, but the point was Reagan got shot as well. And anyhow, it's just weird. But so I started, I was putting this video together, and then, I think they announced Biden's presidency like an hour ago. I go on Wikipedia and he's in there. President-elect of the United States, Joe Biden, would be the next in line to be purported to this curse. Okay, so it's like, what? It's like it's already uploaded on Wikipedia that there's a chance that he's going to die because of the year that he's being elected. I just found that really weird as well. So anyhow, there's a song called Tyler and Tippecanoe, all about Harrison, I guess, and his death. So yeah, it's all about the elected presidents on those years. So Pence went to Reno to do a rally. Reno has an arch. It commemorates the completion of the Lincoln and Victoria Highway. This is called the biggest little city in the world, and all the tech companies are in that city. And on November 5th in 2016, there was an attempted assassination kind of event happened when Trump was at a rally there. It happened at 5:55. And the man said, and then all of a sudden, people next to me started to get violent. They started grabbing my arm and trying to rip the sign out of my hand because he had a sign saying that he was opposing Trump as a Republican. He was a Republican, he said. He said that initially he tried to defend himself, but then claimed someone was trying to grab his neck and they could have strangled him to death. He also made it clear that he was not a supporter of Hillary Clinton and had no former connections to the campaign. And the people who attacked me, I'm not blaming them, I'm blaming Donald Trump's hate rhetoric, he said. So, so anyhow, it's what I'm saying is it went back to the neck again. Okay, so it's always to do with the neck. So to me, this whole thing with Floyd and having, is the knee on the neck is all referencing this Sic Semper Tyrannis phrase that's going back to the Civil War in the United States and the Civil War in Rome. And of course, the phrase being used, I can't breathe, but this is like also the people that are anti-mass are saying the same phrase. So I started listening to this song, and she's got this about this revolution, and she's got the same phrase on the TV, get off my neck again. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like everywhere. So that's why I did this video. I just had to share this with you. So you know how I keep saying, December 24th, so important. This is when George Washington crossed the Delaware, and then Trump went to the historical site where he was there for a week before he did cross the Delaware in Pennsylvania. So I thought that was really relevant that he happened to go to that because he's referencing Christmas again by going to these places. He's kind of giving us clues. And here's the picture, famous picture of George Washington, but there's a painting with Trump as George Washington depicted as him. So it's very important, this whole George Washington on Christmas Eve. It all ties into everything. Now the date calculator of that brings us to 24, well, it's 244, which is like 44 again, times 2 is 88, which is Trump, Mercury. Or you can take 24 times 4, and it's 96, which is Cancer symbol, right? And then, or you can get 1111 through the numbers, which, is all to do with this year being the 11th year. So with the moon cycles, on the 31st, we have 11 full moon cycles with October 1st, 31st, and 11 new moon cycles, October 1st, 31st, since the founding of the United States. And Cancer is ruled by the moon, and that's on the cardinal cross where we want to go to. We want to get to the cardinal cross, not the mutable cross. And of course, Trump tells us about the Mars being with the moon. He's talking about the cardinal cross. This is the high cross, which is the mantra is I am to feel. So it's I am is relating to being with God. Okay, so this is why the cardinal cross is so important. And you want to fly out of the fixed cross as it's burning and be Aquarius at the top of the crown on the fixed cross. You want to be the phoenix and fly out of this crazy cross that we're on and go to freedom on the I am cardinal cross. Be the red bird. So here's Trump speaking, but I will tell you a few months ago, if I weren't your president, you would have had the Jefferson Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial. How about Lincoln? They want to attack even Lincoln. He's probably looking down and he's saying, what the hell did I do? I was on their side, I think. What did I do? They want to attack the Lincoln. If I wasn't your president, they would have attacked the Jefferson Memorial. And I stopped it. I stopped a lot of things. I also saved your Second Amendment, by the way. So, wait a minute. You have 2 weeks to count them. Does that mean we have to hold up the election? Because what I want to find out, who won or lost. I want to find out legitimately who won or lost on November 3rd. I'm not looking to find out on November 19th or on December 1st or from 2 years from now. So then he mentions Lincoln again. I can be more presidential than any president in our history, with a possible exception of Abraham Lincoln, when he wore that hat. That hat, it was a tough hat. So I'm wondering when he says tippy top, there was a saying that Trump said, tippy top. I'm wondering if that's Tippecanoe, and the hat referring to Lincoln, and the Tippecanoe curse was also Lincoln. And then he starts talking about vacuum cleaner. He likes a vacuum. He's like a vacuum cleaner. He's talking about Hunter Biden. The father goes through, the son comes in. A vacuum cleaner, millions of dollars pouring in. He goes a vacuum, and then he goes cleaner, millions of dollars pouring in. So the vacuum is the Aunt Leah constellation that is always in the middle of the Egyptian zodiac, and it is a wind pump vacuum. Okay, so it's right above the Carina ship. Oh, and of course, Trump goes to Rome, Georgia. Of course, Rome. So, of course, CNN has this Julius Caesar assassination coin for sale for 3.5 million with Brutus's picture on it, who killed him. Yeah, so he was killed on the 15th of March in 44 BC, and it's called the Ides of March. And they're saying here that it was possible that this, most likely, this phrase was being used, Sic Semper Tyrannis, also with his death. So it also depicts the daggers, this coin, and the hat, the Liberty hat, the Ides of March. And it was, the coin was made in 42 BC, so we have the number 24 again for Christmas Eve, and also for the second eclipse going through. And then they come up with this word again, the braggadocio, which they were referring Trump to. They're using that word again and referring it to Caesar. So this is what I'm saying. There's a similarity. It's repeating history, between Caesar, Lincoln, and now they're trying to put it onto Trump, the same thing. So it's almost like, they're trying to create a civil war, and because it's all referencing to the same thing. Okay, the Ides of March is the 74th day in the Roman calendar that corresponds with March 15th, but and also to do with Caesar's death, because that's when he died. But it also was the 13th. The Ides was the 13th of most months, but the 15th for March, May, July, and October. And it ties in, originally it was like tied into the full moon for the new year. So it's always going back to the moon again, right? So it's interesting because the moon is what rules the Cardinal Cross. And the Civil War lasted 3 years, so it would be perfect with the biblical prophecy that we're in the 7 years of tribulation between the two eclipses, the two USA eclipses, that 2017 and 2024, and we're at the halfway mark this Christmas, and then the 3 years of chaos, civil war, Satan ruling, all that. It's all tying in. It's all mirroring Caesar's civil war, the Great Civil War. And this is such a coincidence. The Floyd County Democratic Party cancels the planned Blue Wave rally originally scheduled to take in Rome City Hall. Yeah, the large militia presence. Oh, they're even referring to the militia for a civil war. It's just crazy. This popped up on my Facebook, and I went, what? Okay, there's the whale tail. I know what the whale tail is. It's Sittis. It happens to be where the moon is, on the winter solstice and Christmas Eve. And then they have the train. So I'm like, is that like is supposed to be like the Trump train derailing on the whale tail? So I'm just like, So I started to look into this. Okay, so it took place in this town in the Netherlands. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. And it's on the River Meuse, and it's about hunting in the swamps. Okay, so pointy nose also is protruding off the river, is the name of the river. But it's got all these X's all over it and the crown on its coat of arms. I thought that was interesting. But just the whole reference to the swamps and everything, drain the swamps. Yeah, this river was super important with the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of France, the Meuse. It's also as a war there in the winter of 44-45 with the World War II. So it has some interesting history to it, very important history. So with the crown being the Corona Borealis that I did in my last video, that's referring to the maze or the labyrinthine, and this river, which is running through this town, also is the maze. So guess who's following me? Jack Dorsey. But when I got this, actually, I started to realize that he's part of the puzzle. He's born on November 19th, 1976, and one of my gematria friends, Bobby B, sent me his birth date because I was asking him about the winter solstice, and he had realized that, Jack Dorsey, that there's 44 years from his birth to the winter solstice, and we know the number 44 means kills. So it's interesting that his birth matches up to the winter solstice. Like, what's the chances of that being on the 44 plus the 33 days, which is the 33rd Mason, right? So it's just bizarre. So I started thinking about his name being dorsal, like a dorsal fin instead of Dorsey. So it reminded me of Barron's t-shirt with the shark on it, and now Citus is the whale, and there he is, Jack Dorsey on the whale, and they used the whale on Twitter when I started looking into this. There's Trump, talking to him about all, him deleting people's tweets, and I just couldn't believe it when he's sitting on the whale. Even the Simpsons have it's called jump the shark is a saying, like it's like you weren't really on the mark, you were past overdue or whatever. And but Jack Dorsey's on the whale. It's crazy. So they even mentioned this article with Jack Dorsey being interviewed by Ted Cruz about Jump the Shark, but also, that the October surprise. And I'm starting to think like October surprise. They keep mentioning it. And I'm thinking, it's the octopus, right? It's Ursula. It's like the purple plasma again. It's like, maybe that's what the October surprise is. I don't know, but they've said it a few times now, so I'm just kind of putting it out there. Okay, so this is where the moon is on the winter solstice, the 3 days before Christmas Eve. And this star called Deneb Ketos Shemal, I did some research on that. So I couldn't believe when I found this. It's all to do with the whale tail, right? But then in Arabic, it actually means, the whale tail, but it also means the first frog. Okay, and Fomolo being the second frog. Fomolo is a very important star. It's the bottom of Aquarius. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, the frog again. It's Kek. Ah! This is a big part of the whole pro-Trump movement. But then I found this Kek where they have him as Jesus. Oh my God. So I'm like, oh my God, it's 3 days before Christmas when the moon is on the whale tail. And and then the sun dies on winter solstice for 3 days, and then it resurrects. So I don't know if this is all symbolism for this, but I did a tweet to William Moon about it, and I also did the Aries, Mars, Lamb of God, and he liked both of them. And this star, on the whale tail, Citus's tail, the white squall whale, is an orange giant, and is that why Trump's always referred to as, Bad Man Orange and Pumpkinhead? Oh my goodness. You have to remember we're living on the fixed cross, which is relating to Leo being the sun and Scorpio being the water on the pillars. And this mantra to these constellations and chakras are, I love to enjoy through my hips, like through sexuality, through Scorpio. And this realm that we live in is all based on sex, enjoy, consumption. Okay, so this realm is collapsing and the Lion King has to fall. Okay, so this is really what's being mirrored back at us. And what's interesting is the announcement that Trump has been defeated is 45 days exactly to the winter solstice when the sun, the Lion King, falls every year. Okay, it like the sun dies every year for 3 days, and then gets resurrected on Jesus's birthday every year. But it's like they're mirroring the planets and what they do to this realm of Rome falling, like this realm of the fixed cross, and the United States being like the new Rome. So Trump being the 45th president, 45 days out from the winter solstice, they declare he's defeated. 6 weeks, 3 days add up to 9, 45 days add up to 9, 1,080 hours add up to 9, and the minutes bring us to 24. And 24, is when the second eclipse goes through, that aligns with the Olympic alchemic symbol for the 2024 Olympics is Jupiter, and also it's in 2024, and Christmas Eve is number 24. Okay, so it's all done by the numbers. And this ties into John Brown with 63 years old when they hung him, and it's 6 weeks, 3 days out when they announced Biden defeating Trump, 45 days from the winter solstice, 6 weeks, 3 days. This reminded me of the Rush album Farewell to Kings, and the king gets killed and he's sitting in his throne and the whole world's collapsing around him. And this, I do think, is what they're mirroring, the collapse of the fixed cross. And the other crazy thing about this part of the sky, the tail of the Sittis, that's exactly where Barron Trump is born. His sun is when he's born. And Enki is in Aries, Enki. And his Saturn is on the moon, Cancer. So it's kind of weird when Trump said this thing about the vacuum cleaner and the father goes through and the sun comes in the vacuum. So I'm kind of thinking, like, is it not only just about Hunter Biden, but is it to do with the whole mythos of Osiris and Horus? Because the Lion King, and Simba represents Osiris's death, and then the resurrection of Osiris is through Horus, his son. Okay, because the mythos of Osiris, he got killed, and then his wife put him back together again, and she got impregnated by his body being put back together, and it ended up making her son, but the soul of the father was in the son. Okay, so I don't know if that's what he's referring to with this, because there's a link here between Trump and Barron Trump, because of the way the planets are aligning with the winter solstice, and then Barron being born there. So the moon, if something happens to Trump with the moon being there, and then that is when, that's when Barron was born, with his sun being there, all on this tail of Sittis, the whale. So it's almost like the Lion King and Simba story, being referenced, with all tying into the winter solstice. And it's done through a vacuum. It's done through a black hole. This is how they transfer the souls back, what they did in Egypt, in the pyramid, through the king's chamber and the queen's chamber. That's what they were doing. They were transferring souls from the king dying into the newborn. And then, of course, Trump is born between the Silver Gate, the Silver Archway, St. Louis, and he's born on the Crab Nebula, one of the first recorded nebulas in the 1100s, and it's very important, has a sound coming from it, and of course that's the moon, right? The crab again, which is supposed to be all the manger of Christ. Okay, so I'm just kind of like, it's weird how, this is all referring, lining up with the winter solstice, with the position of the moon on the winter solstice is, where Barron is born, and then, the Cancer being related to Barron's Saturn, and Trump's sun being on a Cancer nebula, which is always going back to the moon again, because this is the cardinal cross. It's ruled by the moon. And here, Robert Suffer had dropped this pic on one of his videos, and I loved it because it's ascension, right? The snake, and of course, Aries is up on the crown. So yeah, Aries, it's cardinal cross. It rules when you ascend. We're in the fixed cross, and the constellations right now are going one way, going counterclockwise, and then when you're on the cardinal cross, your body's running through the constellations from Pisces being at your feet all the way clockwise. Okay, so it depends on which reality you're in. The other thing I wanted to look into was the last time we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. NASA had it down as May 5th. There was a big conjunction with the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon, all in not a really tight cluster, but they're all in the same location in the sky, mostly in Aries and a little bit in Taurus. So, we had the crown conjunction with Saturn, Jupiter on Aries, and then now we're going into, the birthday of Christ, or the day that the sun dies and then reappears 3 days later, resurrecting. So it's all mythos. We're in this really important time of civilization. It's crazy, and you can see the reflection of it through the media and everything that's going on. It's like total chaos, and everybody's getting pulled onto the pillars, and everybody's emotions are running high with the election, and it's just really challenging to just kind of sit back and go, this is all like just an illusion of repetitive history. and they're just pulling our emotional strings, because I'm sure we've all lived through these other past times. So, we've had our positions before that we probably have in our DNA, and we're just attached to the pillars. And to walk that middle path is going to be so challenging, especially if something happens to one of these, contenders for the presidency. If something physically happens to them, it's going to be traumatic for the civilization. It's just going to be turmoil. And if this happens on the winter solstice, 3 days before Christmas, and this ascension event is supposed to happen, there's not going to be too many people that are going to be in a bliss state, and in theta brainwaves. And this is something I want to really stress on, how important it is to be working on your own emotional state and just trying to get out of the chaos. It's everywhere. You go on social media, it's there, and you talk to people, and and you go shopping, and people got masks on. It's like you can't get away from it unless you're in nature, right? So it's really important, and I think it's just going to get more chaotic. So we really need to do our inner work and try to pull through this and try to walk that middle path. It's essential, and help other people to do the same. And I appreciate all your support, all my wonderful subscribers. You guys are awesome, and you're dropping me stuff, and I love having conversations with you when you do readings with me. It's really fun, and we get to share stuff. So it's quite a network of people that are starting to see through the illusion and starting to get on the middle path. So I'm excited about that, because more and more people are seeing it. So if you can share this video, or tell people about the channel, so we can get more people there, because we're running out of time and things are going to get more chaotic, it appears, with what's, the history has been and where it's going. I was invited to speak with the Elder Wisdom series, The Roaring Truth, with Michelle and Christy, and I really enjoyed our conversation. And it's just me being interviewed. There's no screenshots, but if you want to check out this channel, they're really trying to get the truth out, and they're doing interviews with many other people that are all truthers, and so a lot of good information through their channel. And I would love it if you guys checked out my interview. It was my first interview. A few more things I wanted to talk about with Mercury and the Sun on the winter solstice, right in the Golden Gate. And Mercury is Trump, right? Because it's 88 and the orbit's 88 for Mercury. This is the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. It's a really big cluster, and here's Saturn, and you can't even see Jupiter because he's right on top of him. That's Jupiter. This is all happening on the winter solstice, 3 days before Christmas Eve. And the reason this is so important is because the Capitoline Hill, which Capitol Hill is named after, was originally named after Saturn. Okay, it's Mons Saturnius, and then it got changed to the temple of Jupiter Maximus. So yeah, the Capitol Hill is named after Saturn and Jupiter. And if you don't think this is important, this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction on the winter solstice this year, on the 2020 vision year, you're not getting the full picture. And so there's also 7 hills of Rome, and I think they're probably referencing the 7 sisters, okay, the Pleiades, because this is all about the Pleiades and the Silver Gate Taurus, and this is exactly where these conjunctions were 20 years ago. Mars was, by the Pleiades and everything. And then when George Floyd, all that was going on, we had Eunomia, the Justice asteroid was right by the Pleiades, right when Atlas was going by there. So, we knew something was going to happen. I just didn't expect it to be that. But now I understand why, because it all goes back to Rome and Julius Caesar, the whole thing. And weird enough, when you put this terrible word in with Donald Trump, the numbers come up to 1221, and the 111 is Cancer, because it's 11 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon every day. So we've got the 12th and 21st of the 12 all to do with that wording in Gematria. So it's kind of disturbing, but I think it's all an illusion. I don't think any of it is going to be really real. This was also a very telling tweet that William Moon had put out that kind of got me on this whole thing with Lincoln. And then weird that Trump was talking about Herschel Walker, the football player, and he goes, they had a ballad, the ballad of Herschel Walker. So I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a song So I looked it up, and sure enough, there was the Ballad of Herschel Walker. Well, not Walker, but Lawson, and it's about a man getting hung. Okay, I'll leave you with the song playing because I couldn't find the lyrics, but yeah, so Lincoln upside down with the White House photographer, John Brown, with the whole thing about the Civil War and the black and white, and he got hung, a white guy. So, it's all mirroring. It's like, you know, it's all about the duality. It's always about the duality. So I'm just saying that this is really crazy. So I'm assuming something big is going to happen on the winter solstice. We still don't really know what it is. Um, it could be something to do with Biden because of what Wikipedia has printed. And then his name is like forbidden. If you put the four in front of it, it's for Biden, forbidden. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to play it out, but it's a bunch of actors playing their parts, and the world is a stage. Shakespeare. If you times 44 by this year, 44 being the year that Julius Caesar was assassinated, you get the number 8888, and that's Mercury doubled, and on the mutable cross, Mercury's hung upside down doubled, okay, at the bottom. So I think it's a lot of this hanging is referencing the mutable cross. The mantra for the mutable cross is I can to believe. So you basically believe everything that's being told to you. You're hung upside down. Your root chakras are up in the air. And you're willing to take the vaccine. You're willing to go in total lockdown for 3.5 years, all for the service of others. That's what the mutable cross is mainly about. It's the service of others. So if you don't want any part of that, you're going to have to disconnect from this realm of society, like no shopping, no public appearances, because you will be ostracized because you don't have the vaccine. Trump has announced that the vaccine will be administered by the military by the end of this year, so right after Christmas. So this is all tying in to this timeline. So we have to really think about balancing ourselves and saying, okay, I'm not going to get pulled into that reality of the mutable cross. I'm not going into this whole lockdown reality, and I'm just going to live with nature and disconnect from it all. This is really the choice, your spiritual choice, and every person has their own choice to do what they want to do, and you can't change people for wanting to do that path. They're just not ready to go through the door on the cardinal cross yet and be the phoenix rising from the ashes and transforming yourself. They want to experience that reality of the mutable cross. So this is what this is all about. It's the fixed cross is collapsing. You have to rise from it, and the two paths are there, mutable or cardinal.
One night as Herschel came home down the hill, he noticed that the house was dark and still. From a tree limb the next day, they found him dead, and in his hand a crumbled note that read, "Goodbye, Paul, I've gone and taken Cassie May. Now your son can grow up somewhere far away from the still here in the hill of Tennessee. And I hope this leaves you hanging from a tree."